Alright, hello everybody, this is Antonio Wolf. We're continuing A Voyage To Arcturus. We are on chapter 13, The Womb Flash Force. Here along with me is my friend Hyperion. I think I had some insights about prior chapters, but I don't know, now I forgot about them. Probably I'll remember them.
That's what always happens.
It was about certain things, just in general, about the story so far, and I had them yesterday and this morning, and then I just don't have them now. We will see. So, let's start. He awoke to his third day on torments. It's Maskell. By the way, remember that days are like twice as long here, and years are about 3 times as long. So he's been here the equivalent of about 6 days. Well, 4 days up to now. He's starting his 5th, and then, the latter half of the day is going to be the 6th of Earth days. Which is funny, because he was told he'd be lucky if he got more than 2 of Earth days. Because, what is it, chapter 2 or something, he was like, I'd willingly, give up my life for 24 hours on another planet. And Crag was like, yeah, you'd be lucky if you got 2. So he's already extremely lucky. So he awoke his 3rd day on torments. His limbs ached. He lay on his side, looking stupidly at his surroundings. The forest was like night, but that period of the night when the grey dawn is about to break and objects begin to be guessed at rather than seen. 2 or 3 amazing shadowy shapes, as broad as houses, loomed up out of the twilight. He did not realize that they were trees until he turned over on his back and followed their course upward. Far overhead, so high up that he dared not calculate the height, he saw their tops glittering in the sunlight against a tiny patch of blue sky. Clouds of mist rolling over the floor of the forest kept interrupting his view. In their silent passage they were like phantoms, flitting among the trees. The leaves underneath him were sodden, and heavy drops of moisture splashed onto his head from time to time. He continued lying there, trying to reconstruct the events of the preceding day. His brain was lethargic and confused. Something terrible had happened, but what it was he could not for a long time recollect. Then suddenly there came before his eyes the ghastly closing scene at dusk on the Sant Plateau. Spadedevil's crushed and bloody features and Tydomin's dying sighs. He shuddered convulsively and felt sick. The peculiar moral outlook that had dictated these brutal murders had departed from him during the night, and now he recognized what he had done. During the whole of the previous day he seemed to have been laboring under a series of heavy enchantments. First Oshex had enslaved him, then Tydomin, then Spaedevil, and lastly Catice. They had forced him to murder and violate. He had guessed nothing, but had imagined that he was traveling as a free and enlightened stranger. What was this nightmare journey for? And would it continue in the same way? So, halfway through the story, very important, he finally realizes that he's not being his own person this entire time. And he doesn't even realize that it's before that. This happened already with Joywind. Like already with her, he also had come under this general control of some force or idea that just completely took over him, became his will, and he had no suspicion that such a thing was going on. This is important that this is something true about all of us. If you have never engaged in philosophical reflection, you are literally controlled by ideas, and you're motivated by things which you are not aware of, which you believe to be your own, and which, until you come to actually reflect on them, you won't realize are not in fact your own. Or rather, in this case, it's that you haven't been free in the way that you thought you were. Because, I mean, it's not like anybody forced him to do anything. He's been manipulated, yes, but a manipulation in which he was complicit. His own understanding of things at the time led him to engage in the way that he did. Interesting thing of like the philosophy that we're into, German idealism in general, is the awareness that this is the case. Hegel notes things like, historically, for example, people think that philosophy ain't shit, and you got to be a go-getter like Napoleon and take over the world, because it's all about will. And Hegel has this famous phrase about, the men of action are nothing but the unwitting tools of the men of thinking, which is true. Napoleon was motivated to do what he did, not out of some blind will from nowhere. It was also motivated by a certain kind of rational understanding of the world, which, he himself did not come up with. Other philosophers long before him, dead for thousands of years, came up with them. And, slowly these ideas trickle into society and basically take over and become this unquestioned background where nobody ever wonders, why are these things the way they are? Why should we believe things are the way they are? It just seems obvious to us. Well, that's just the way they are. It's just science. You just look out there and, you just know that the sun is made of hydrogen, man, and that's gas. What is it? Schelling has a far deeper phrase of that regarding how stupid it is that we think that we control and own ideas when it's the opposite. And if you do a little bit of reflection, it is obviously the opposite. You act the way you do because you believe a certain way that you do. You're not some dumb animal. You're not a dog. You're not a monkey, a chimp. You're not a bird. You're not born with instincts. The only instinct that you have is the instinct to learn. Barring, the later development of sexual instincts. But beyond that, the human being can't take care of themselves from the get-go. They have to learn everything. And that's the only instinct they generally have. Beyond that, everything you are is some kind of learned thing, either learned behavior or a learned idea. And these kind of come together. So that, if you believe that if you believe in God, for example, you believe the world is ordered in a certain way, and you live your life a certain way. If you don't believe in God, you believe the world is ordered in a certain other way, and you live a certain kind of way. So what you do is not really separable from what you believe. And since you don't come up with what you believe, rather pretty much all of it, really, when you're a child and a teenager, is just handed to you, and you just take it. What else are you supposed to do? You have nothing within you that would bring you to question these things. There's a whole culture that's telling you to just take these things for granted, that they're the facts, and people who you respect, people who you don't respect, all kinds of things. But there's institutions, and just like language, you don't question it, you just take it and you use it. So,
I agree.
So, anyways, yes, we're all under the same spell that he was. He'll still fall under this, despite the fact that he's become aware of this, just as we all do. Just because you become aware that you're controlled by something doesn't mean that suddenly, magically, you're no longer controlled by it. Though, I mean, if you're going to get free, you definitely ought to know it first. Title of the place, Womb Flash Forest. These are being told by Cat Eyes in the prior chapter, as well as, the chapter on Pana's story. Womb Flash is where the wise men of Torments are at. Cat Eye said that those were where the deepest minds are at, and it's a womb, place of birth. Birth of what? Birth of the spirit. Birth of understanding. Flesh. Well, it's what do we call those these days? Brainstorms, all these other things. Comes like that. It's not a very slow development. It's a very hard, fast development. You have these flash insights. And it's a forest. It's a very fitting place. It's a very tall forest. It's a forest that it seems to be locked in a perpetual twilight, very, very deep twilight, which is significant in occult understandings. One of the ways that is very common to engage with mystical things is in what's called, hypnagogic, I don't know how you pronounce it, states, which is and a lot of famous people did this, by the way. You probably should look this up. Edison did this, Tesla did this, who else is, I think Einstein partially did it. A lot of people who are very well-known bright minds and geniuses end up somehow realizing that being in this weird twilight state between dreams and awakeness is very fruitful for gaining these genius moments of insight. The fact that it's a forest as well, so one, it gives a nice reason for why you have this structure of this perpetual twilight. Another one is nature. This is he's being submerged into the depths of nature here, which is part of the occult ideas of enlightenment. Partly, you must first go down into hell before you go up to heaven, and in understanding and become enlightened. This isn't hell particularly, but this is nature. You have to go into the gross materiality, and somehow in losing yourself in that for a moment, you find the real core, which slingshots you back up to the clarity of insight necessary. So anyways, he continued lying there trying to reconstruct the events of the preceding day. His brain was lethargic and confused. Something terrible had happened. Okay, I already did that. So the silence of the forest was so intense that he heard no sound except the pumping of blood through his arteries. Putting his hand to his face, he found that his remaining probe had disappeared, and that he was in possession of 3 eyes. The third eye was on his forehead, where the old sorb had been. He could not guess its use. He still had his third arm, but it was nerveless. Now he puzzled his head for a long time, trying unsuccessfully to recall that name which had been the last word spoken by Cat Eyes. He got up with the intention of resuming his journey. He had no toilet to make and no meal to prepare. The forest was tremendous. The nearest tree appeared to him to have a circumference of at least 100 feet. Other dim boles looked equally large. But what gave the scene its aspect of immensity was the vast spaces separating tree from tree. It was like some gigantic, supernatural hall in a life after death. The lowest branches were 50 yards or more from the ground. There was no underbrush. The soil was carpeted only by the dead, wet leaves. He looked all around him to find his direction, but the cliffs of sand which he had descended were invisible. Every way was like every other way. He had no idea which quarter to attack. He grew frightened and muttered to himself. Craning his neck back, he stared upward and tried to discover the points of the compass from the direction of the sunlight, but it was impossible. While he was standing there, anxious and hesitating, he heard the drum taps, the rhythmical beats proceeding from some distance off. The unseen drummer seemed to be marching through the forest, away from him. "Sartor," he said under his breath. The next moment he marveled at himself for uttering the name. That mysterious being had not been in his thoughts, nor was there any ostensible connection between him and the drumming. He began to reflect, But in the meantime, the sounds were traveling away, automatically started walking in the same direction. The drum beats had this peculiarity. Though odd and mystical, there was nothing awe-inspiring in them, but on the contrary, they reminded him of some place and some life with which he was perfectly familiar. Once again, they caused all his other sense impressions to appear false. The sounds were intermittent. They would go on for a minute or for 5 minutes, and then cease for perhaps a quarter of an hour. Maskell followed them as well as he could. He walked hard among the huge, indistinct trees in the attempt to come up with the origin of the noise, but the same distance always seemed to separate them. The forest from now onward descended. The gradient was mostly gentle, about 1 foot in 10, but in some places it was much steeper, and in other parts again it was practically level ground for quite long stretches. There were great swampy marshes through which Maskell was obliged to splash. It was a matter of indifference to him how wet he became. If only he could catch sight of that individual with a drum. Mile after mile was covered, and still he was no nearer to doing so. The gloom of the forest settled down upon his spirits. He felt despondent, tired, and savage. He had not heard the drum beats for some while, and was half inclined to discontinue the pursuit. Passing around a great columnar tree trunk, he almost stumbled against a man who was standing on the farther side. He was leaning against the trunk with one hand in an attitude of repose. His other hand was resting on a staff. Maskell stopped short and stared at him. He was nearly naked and of gigantic build. He overtopped Maskell by a head. His face and body were faintly phosphorescent. His eyes, 3 in number, were pale green and luminous, shining like lamps. His skin was hairless, but the hair of his head was piled up in thick black coils and fastened like a woman's. His features were absolutely tranquil, but a terrible, quiet energy seemed to lie just underneath the surface. Maskell addressed him. "Did the drumming come from you?" The man shook his head. "What is your name?" He replied in a strange, strained, twisted voice. Maskell gathered that the name he gave was Dream Center. "What is that drumming?" "Surtur," said Dream Center. "Is it advisable for me to follow it?" "Why?" "Perhaps he intends me to. He brought me here from Earth." Dream Center caught hold of him, bent down, and peered into his face. "Not you, but Nightspore." This was the first time that Maskell had heard Nightspore's name since his arrival on the planet. He was so astonished that he could frame no more questions. "Eat this," said Dream Center. "Then we will chase the sounder together." He picked something up from the ground and handed it to Maskell. He could not see distinctly, but it felt like a hard, round nut of the size of a fist. "I can't crack it." Dream Center took it between his hands and broke it into pieces. Maskell then ate some of the pulpy interior, which was intensely disagreeable. "What am I doing in torments, then?" he asked. "You came to steal Muspelfire, to give a deeper life to men, never doubting if your soul could endure that burning." Maskell could hardly decipher the strangled words. Muspel? That's the name I've been trying to remember ever since I awoke. Dream Center suddenly turned his head sideways and appeared to listen for something. He motioned with his hand to Maskell to keep quiet. "Is it the drumming?" "Hush! They come." He was looking toward the upper forest. The now familiar drum rhythm was heard, this time accompanied by the tramp of marching feet. So, obviously the name is meaningful, Dream Center. I think part of it is phonetic, like Dream Center.
Yeah.
But does center have any other meaning?
I assume they're reading along, but it is DREAMSINTER.
It could also be dreams inter,
Dreams,
which would also fit.
Like internal, and
like between.
Yeah.
Because like this place is the in-between world as well.
Inter as in between, yeah. And sin, of course. I don't know if
maybe.
it's intentional, but it's there in the middle of it. Yeah, he's not really particularly sinful or anything.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's that particularly. Yeah, I think it's kind of the phonetic play like a dream center, but also dreams in between. Because this whole place is literally an in between dream, hypnagogic world. So here we get a little bit more of what I've already stated. Maskell is indeed special. He's somewhat the Promethean archetype. And even though he has no idea what the hell he's doing, he's just bumbling along. The goal that he's unknowingly after is he came to steal Muspelfire, to give a deeper life to men, never doubting if your soul could endure that burning. At least the second part we already know. I mean, he took on this adventure not really wondering or thinking through whether, he could make it. Although at the same time, he just decided, well, it was worth it anyways. He said he was willing to die for it. So, he's going through it with no end in sight, but part of the end is already there. He's already convinced that at this point he was this searcher being is the reason he's here. First he thought it was shaping. Now with having gone along with Spay Devil and meeting Cat Eyes, he knows for sure that is indeed not the case. Searcher and shaping are not the same thing. Crystalman's a lying being. This world is somehow wrong in a way that he doesn't quite understand, but he can tell there's some other world which is more real. The mention of Night Spore. Well, we're going to get a bit more of Night Spore so far. Not that Night Spore's going to say anything, but we're going to see a little bit of him. And I might comment then afterwards what that deal is. Because we literally don't get to find out until the very last chapter what the deal is with that. But this is the first clear intimation that there's something odd about the connection of Night Spore and Maskell. So, all right, let's continue. So Maskell saw marching through the trees and heading toward them 3 men in single file, separated from one another by only a yard or so. They were traveling downhill at a swift pace, and looked neither to left nor right. They were naked. Their figures were shining against the black background of the forest with a pale supernatural light, green and ghostly. When they were abreast of him, about 20 feet off, he perceived who they were. The first man was himself, Maskell. The second was Crag. The third man was Night Spore. Their faces were grim and set. The source of the drumming was out of sight. The sound appeared to come from some point in front of them. Maskell and Dream Center put themselves in motion to keep up with the swiftly moving marchers. At the same time, a low, faint music began. Its rhythm stepped with the drum beats, but unlike the latter, it did not seem to proceed from any particular quarter of the forest. It resembled the subjective music heard in dreams, which accompanies the dreamer everywhere as a sort of natural atmosphere, rendering all his experiences emotional. It seemed to issue from an unearthly orchestra, and was strongly troubled, pathetic, and tragic. Maskell marched and listened, and as he listened, it grew louder and stormier, but the pulse of the drum interpenetrated all of the other sounds, like the quiet beating of reality. His emotion deepened. He could not have said if minutes or hours were passing. The spectral procession marched on A little way ahead, on a path parallel with his own and Dream Center's, the music pulsated violently. Crag lifted his arm and displayed a long, murderous-looking knife. He sprang forward and, raising it over the phantom Maskel's back, stabbed him twice, leaving the knife in the wound the second time. Maskel threw up his arms and fell down dead. Crag leaped into the forest and vanished from sight. Nightspore marched on alone, stern and unmoved. The music rose to a crescendo. The whole dim, gigantic forest was roaring with sound. The tones came from all sides, from above, from the ground under their feet. It was so grandly passionate that Maskel felt his soul loosening from his bodily envelope. He continued to follow Nightspore. A strange brightness began to glow in front of them. It was not daylight, but a radiance such that he had never seen before, and such as he could not have imagined to be possible. Nightspore moved straight toward it. Maskel felt his chest bursting. The light flashed higher. The awful harmonies of the music followed hard one upon another like the waves of a wild, magic ocean. His body was incapable of enduring such shocks, and all of a sudden he tumbled over in a faint that resembled death. All right. If you've ever read mystical experiences of people having like transcendental mystical experiences, whether it be on psychedelics or just, through meditation or some spontaneous occurrence, this is not rare. The whole feeling of crazy energies and feeling like you're about to die and that it's unbearable is quite common. The people they're following is obviously this weird... it has to do with him. Certainly it's part of what Maskel himself is looking for. He's trying to... he's actually going to comment at the beginning of the next chapter. What is it about? So we can just continue on with it. So, chapter 14, Pole Crab. The morning slowly passed. Maskel made some convulsive movements and opened his eyes. He sat up, blinking. All was night-like and silent in the forest. The strange light had gone, the music had ceased, Dream Center had vanished. He fingered his beard, clotted with Hydaman's blood, and fell into a deep muse. According to Pana and Cadice, this forest contains wise men. Perhaps Dream Center was one. Perhaps that vision I have just seen was a specimen of his wisdom. It looked almost like an answer to my question. I ought not to have asked about myself, but about Surtur. Then I would have got a different answer. I might have learned something. I might have seen him. He remained quiet and apathetic for a bit. So the question he asked is, well, what the hell am I doing here? So what answer could we glean from what he saw? Whatever he's doing here, he's already been told he's going to die. Particularly, it seems to be that this is intimating that he's going to die because Crag kills him. But in a way, he seems to be required for whatever's going on with Crag and Nightspore. In that somehow he's in the front right now. He's kind of leading the way. But where is Crag and where is Nightspore? We don't know. I think the last time we saw anything with Crag was in Discorn, when Hydaman was trying to take his body, and he saw Crag from chapter 1 in the weird little time loop kind of thing. So continuing, but I couldn't face that awful glare, he proceeded. It was bursting my body. He warned me too. And so Surtur does really exist, and my journey stands for something. But why am I here, and what can I do? Who is Surtur? Where is he to be found? Something wild came into his eyes. What did Dream Center mean by his not you, but Nightspore? Am I a secondary character? Is he regarded as important and I as unimportant? Where is Nightspore and what is he doing? Am I to wait for his time and pleasure? Can I originate nothing? He continued sitting up with straight extended legs. I must make up my mind that this is a strange journey and that the strangest things will happen in it. It's no use making plans, for I can't see 2 steps ahead. Everything is unknown. But one thing's evident. Nothing but the wildest audacity will carry me through, and I must sacrifice everything else to that. And therefore, if Surtur shows himself again, I shall go forward to meet him, even if it means death. Through the black, quiet aisles of the forest, the drum beats came again. The sound was a long way off and very faint. It was like the last mutterings of thunder after a heavy storm. Maskell listened without getting up. The drumming faded into silence and did not return. He smiled queerly and said aloud, "Thanks, Surtur. I accept the omen." So just a little bit of a comment of the thing. It's no use making plans, for I can't see 2 steps ahead. Everything is unknown, but one thing is evident. Nothing but the wildest audacity will carry me through, and I must sacrifice everything else to that. It's not like he really, well, it's good that he realizes this, but he's been doing it anyways. He's just been going all out from the beginning. It's like, want to go to a world where you can die? Sure. You meet someone new, just take it for what it is. They tell you things, and you're like, okay, well, it is whatever they say. There's nothing I can say against it. Just taking the wild chances on everything. So many things could have killed him already, and he's made it this far. He's learned some things, that's for sure. And a lot of people say that there's no development to Maskell's character. I disagree. I think even up to now, we've already had some slight developments. As far as we know from the beginning, Maskell's just kind of generally tired of life, and he reaches this world. Suddenly, he finds a new purpose. And the main purpose he's gotten is since he met Crystalman in Delusion Plane. And that's where he first went, well, I'm kind of special. I came to this world with Crag and Nightspore, and it seems that, here is this being telling me they're Surtur, and that I'm here to do something for them. So there's a purpose to my life. So he's been thinking for quite a bit here that he's on some grand mission, a mission of God knows what, but he's on a grand mission. Which is a big change for somebody, before that just was kind of well, I exist, but I'm just kind of tired of existence, and what else is there? So let's see. When he was about to get up, he found that the shriveled skin that had been his third arm was flapping disconcertingly with every movement of his body. He made perforations in it all around, as close to his chest as possible, with the fingernails of both hands. Then he carefully twisted it off. In that world of rapid growth and ungrowth, he judged that the stump would soon disappear. After that, he rose and peered into the darkness. The forest at that point sloped rather steeply, and, without thinking twice about it, he took the downhill direction, never doubting it would bring him somewhere. As soon as he started walking, his temper became gloomy and morose. He was shaken, tired, dirty, and languid with hunger. Moreover, he realized that the walk was not going to be a short one. Be that as it may, he determined to sit down no more until the whole dismal forest was at his back. Makes sense. As usual, the environment deeply affects his own internal environment, his moods, his ways of thinking. The downhill aspect of the forest, and in the main forest, it's mainly very smooth downhills, but still, occasional strong dips and such. I think that's kind of expressive of the ways in which, for the most part, dreams kind of drag you along. When you're going downhill, gravity's kind of doing most of the work for you. The main thing you got to do is just keep yourself in control. And this one, he's done with the dream. He's somehow made it exactly to an edge of the forest where finally it's just kind of a steeper downhill, much faster. It's like coming out of when you come out of the dream, right? The moment you finally move, it's a quick transition from the dream to waking up. The thing about his temper became gloomy. Besides the fact that yes, the forest itself is just seems to be a gloomy environment. It's also something that happens quite often with people, in that you have an amazing experience and you come back down to reality. It's kind of a bit depressing. So one after another, the shadowy house-like trees were observed, avoided, and passed. Far overhead, the little patch of glowing sky was still always visible. Otherwise, he had no clue to the time of day. He continued tramping sullenly down the slope for many damp, slippery miles, in some places through bogs. When presently the twilight seemed to thin, he guessed that the open world was not far away. The forest grew more palpable and gray, and now he saw its majesty better. The tree trunks were like round towers, and so wide were the intervals that they resembled natural amphitheaters. He could not make out the color of the bark. Everything he saw amazed him, but his admiration was of the growling, grudging kind. The difference in light between the forest behind him and the forest ahead became so marked that he could no longer doubt that he was on the point of coming out. Stuff about amphitheaters. Dreams are places. The domain of dreams is where you're supposed to be shown things, either about yourself and much more rarely about some objective things of the spiritual kind mostly, and even rare is objective things of, the everyday kind. So that metaphor of amphitheaters is quite fitting. It's a place to observe. So real light was in front of him. Looking back, he found he had a shadow. The trunks acquired a reddish tint. He quickened his pace. As the minutes went by, the bright patch ahead grew luminous and vivid. It had a tinge of blue. He also imagined that he heard the sound of surf. All that part of the forest toward which he was moving became rich with color. The boles of the trees were of a deep, dark red. Their leaves, high above his head, were all fire-hued. The dead leaves on the ground were of a color he could not name. At the same time, he discovered the use of his third eye. By adding a third angle to his sight, every object he looked at stood out in greater relief. The world looked less flat, more realistic and significant. He had a stronger attraction toward his surroundings. He seemed somehow to lose his egotism and to become free and thoughtful. At this time, the idea of higher dimensions was already around. I mean, this is in the 1920s, so Einstein had his big breakthrough, become a superstar at the time. So, I think that it had already been, work had already been done that was, if for people interested at least, well known regarding hypotheses of what would the world look like either in higher dimensions. And this is not a higher dimension necessarily, but the whole thing about how would a world look like with 3 eyes would things look sharper? Things. Uh, as far as I know, yes, it would. Clarity, not so much, but that you would be able to tell depth a lot even better, for sure. It's mainly significant. One, it's three eyes. He has gained some insight, so he's gained a new vantage point, so that creates a new relief or level of relief on the world, let's say. So he's getting closer to the truth. And after coming out of the dreams, dreams are kind of hazy, fuzzy in certain ways. They don't look as real normally, at least unless you're a vivid dreamer, as waking reality. But just like when you have new insights, the world is clear, quite literally, but in an intelligible sense. Except here it's manifesting in a sort of sensuous sense, as well as intelligible. Now through the last trees he saw full daylight. Actually, let me remember what the hell old fire was. Oh, I thought I wrote it down. Well, let's see. Just as blue is delicate and mysterious, yellow, clear, and unsubtle, and red, sanguine and passionate, he felt all fire to be wild and painful and jailed, dreamlike, feverish, and voluptuous. Okay, yeah, that's a very fitting color for that forest. So, let's go back a little bit. So, he had stronger attraction towards his surroundings. He seemed somehow to lose his egotism to become free and thoughtful. Indeed, it's what you require to do philosophy. So now through the last trees, he saw full daylight, less than half a mile separated him from the border of the forest, and eager to discover what lay beyond, he broke into a run. He heard the surf louder. It was a peculiar hissing sound that could proceed only from water, yet was unlike the sea. Almost immediately he came within sight of an enormous horizon of dancing waves, which he knew must be the sinking sea. He fell back into a quick walk, continuing to stare hard. The wind that met him was hot, fresh, and sweet. When he arrived at the final fringe of forest, which joined the wide sands of the shore without any change of level, he leaned with his back to a great tree and gazed his fill, motionless at what lay in front of him. The sands continued east and west in a straight line, broken only here and there by a few creeks. They were of a brilliant orange color, but there were patches of violet. The forest appeared to stand sentinel over the shore for its entire length. Everything else was sea and sky. He had never seen so much water. The semicircle of the skyline was so vast that he might have imagined himself on a flat world, with a range of vision determined only by the power of his eye. The sea was unlike any sea on earth. It resembled an immense liquid opal. On a body of color of rich, magnificent emerald green, flashes of red, yellow, and blue were everywhere shooting up and vanishing. The wave motion was extraordinary. Pinnacles of water were slowly formed until they attained a height of perhaps 10 or 20 feet, when they would suddenly sink downward and outward, creating in their descent a series of concentric rings for long distances around them. Quickly moving currents like rivers in the sea could be seen, racing away from land. They were of a darker green and bore no pinnacles. Where the sea met the shore, the waves rushed over the sands far in, with almost sinister rapidity, accompanied by a weird hissing, spitting sound, which was what Maskell had heard. The green tongues rolled in without foam. So very weird. So I'm thinking pinnacles of water slowly form until they attain heights. So it's kind of like water spouts without the spouting of water. It's just like they slowly spike up and then immediately sink back down. The hissing thing is, well, the sand is really hot. So about 20 miles distant, as he judged, directly opposite him, a long, low island stood up from the sea, black and not distinguished in outline. It was Swaylone's Island. Maskell was less interested in that than in the blue sunset that glowed behind its back. Alpine had set, but the whole northern sky was plunged into the minor key by its afterlight. Branch spell in the zenith was white and overpowering. The day was cloudless and terrifically hot, but where the blue sun had sunk, a somber shadow seemed to overhang the world. Maskell had a feeling of disintegration, just as if two chemically distinct forces were simultaneously acting upon the cells of his body. Since the afterglow of Alpine affected him like this, he thought it more than likely that he would never be able to face that sun itself and go on living. Still, some modification might happen to him that would make it possible. If you don't remember, the reason that it feels like he's going to die while looking at it is because he's under the direct influence of Branch Spell and Alpine at the same time. And these are two physical and spiritual forces at the same time, pulling him in complete opposite directions. So the sea tempted him. He made up his mind to bathe and at once walked toward the shore. The instant he stepped outside the shadow lines of forest trees, the blinding rays of the sun beat down on him so savagely that for a few minutes he felt sick and his head swam. He trod quickly across the sands. The orange-colored parts were nearly hot enough to roast food, he judged, but the violet parts were like fire itself. He stepped on a patch in ignorance and immediately jumped high into the air with a startled yell. The sea was voluptuously warm. It would not bear his weight, so he determined to try swimming. First of all, he stripped off his skin garment, washed it thoroughly with sand and water, and laid it in the sun to dry. Then he scrubbed himself as well as he could and washed out his beard and hair. After that, he waded in a long way until the water reached his breast and took to swimming, avoiding the spouts as far as possible. He found it no pastime. The water was everywhere of unequal density. In some places he could swim, in others he could barely save himself from drowning. In others again he could not force himself beneath the surface at all. There were no outward signs to show what the water had held in store for him. The whole business was most dangerous. He came out feeling clean and invigorated. And by the way, this weird sinking sea phenomenon is actually going to be explained in about 2 chapters. In the chapter on matter play, it's explained what the water itself actually is. He came out feeling clean and invigorated. For a time, he walked up and down the sands, drying himself in the hot sunshine and looking around him. He was a naked stranger in a huge, foreign, mystical world, and whichever way he turned, unknown and threatening forces were glaring at him. The gigantic white, withering branch spell, the awful, body-changing Alpine. The beautiful, deadly, treacherous sea, the dark and eerie Swaylone's Island, the spirit-crushing forest out of which he had just escaped. To all these mighty powers surrounding him on every side, what resources had he, a feeble, ignorant traveler from a tiny planet on the other side of space, to oppose, to avoid being utterly destroyed? Then he smiled to himself. I've already been here 2 days, and still I survive. I have luck, and with that one can balance the universe. But what is luck? A verbal expression or a thank? As he was putting on his skin, which was now dry, the answer came to him, and this time he was grave. Surtur brought me here, and Surtur is watching over me. That is my luck. But what is Surtur in this world? How is he able to protect me against the blind and ungovernable forces of nature? Is he stronger than nature? Hungry as he was for food, he was hungrier still for human society, for he wished to inquire about all these things. He asked himself which way he should turn his steps. There were only two ways, along the shore, either east or west. The nearest creek lay to the east, cutting the sands about a mile away. He walked toward it. The forest face was forbidding and enormously high. It was so squarely turned to the sea that it looked as though it had been planned by tools. Maskell strode along in the shade of the trees, but kept his head constantly turned away from them, toward the sea. There it was more cheerful. The creek, when he reached it, proved to be broad and flat-banked. It was not a river, but an arm of the sea. Its still, dark green water curved around a bend out of sight into the forest. The trees on both banks overhung the water, so that it was completely in shadow. He went as far as the bend, beyond which another short reach appeared. A man was sitting on a narrow shelf of bank, with his feet in the water. He was clothed in a coarse, rough hide, which left his limbs bare. He was short, thick, and sturdy, with short legs and long, powerful arms, turning in hands of an extraordinary size. He was oldish. His face was plain, slab-like, and expressionless. It was full of wrinkles and walnut-colored. Both face and head were bald, and his skin was tough and leathery. He seemed to be some sort of peasant or fisherman. There was no trace in his face of thought for others or delicacy of feeling. He possessed 3 eyes of different colors, jade green, blue, and old-fire. In front of him, riding on the water, moored to the bank, was an elementary raft, consisting of the branches of trees clumsily corded together. Maskell addressed him. "Are you another of the wise men of the Wombflash Forest?" The man answered him in a gruff, husky voice, looking up as he did so. "I'm a fisherman. I know nothing about wisdom." "What name do you go by?" "Pole Crab. What's yours?" "Maskell. If you're a fisherman, you ought to have fish. I'm famishing." Pole Crab grunted and paused a minute before answering. "There's fish enough. My dinner is cooking in the sands now. It's easy enough to get you some more." Maskell found this a pleasant speech. "But how long will it take?" he asked. The man slid the palms of his hands together, producing a shrill, screeching noise. He lifted his feet from the water and clambered onto the bank. In a minute or two, a curious little beast came crawling up to his feet, turning its face and eyes up affectionately, like a dog. It was about 2 feet long and somewhat resembled a small seal, but had 6 legs, ending in strong claws. "Arg, go fish," said Pole Crab hoarsely. The animal immediately tumbled off the bank into the water. It swam gracefully to the middle of the creek and made a pivotal dive beneath the surface, where it remained a great while. "Simple fishing," remarked Maskell. "But what's the raft for?" "To go to sea with. The best fish are out at sea. These are eatable." "That orc seems a highly intelligent creature." Pole Crab grunted again. "I've trained close on 100 of them. The big heads learn best, but they're slow swimmers. The narrowheads swim like eels, but can't be taught. Now I've started interbreeding them. He's one of them." "Do you live here alone?" "No. I've got a wife and 3 boys. My wife's sleeping somewhere, but where the lads are, Shaping knows." Maskell began to feel very much at home with this unsophisticated being. "The raft's all crazy," he remarked, staring at it. If you go far out in that, you got more pluck than I have. I've been to Matterplay on it, said Pole Crab. The Arg reappeared and started swimming to shore, but this time clumsily, as if it were bearing a heavy weight under the surface. When it landed at its master's feet, he saw that each set of claws was clutching a fish. 6 in all, Pole Crab took them from it. He proceeded to cut off the heads and tails with a sharp-edged stone, which he picked up. These he threw to the Arg, which devoured them without any fuss. Pole Crab beckoned to Maskell to follow him, and, carrying the fish, walked toward the open shore by the same way that he had come. When they reached the sands, he sliced the fish, removed the entrails, and, digging a shallow hole in a patch of violet sand, placed the remainder of the carcasses in it and covered them over again. Then he dug up his own dinner. Maskell's nostrils quivered at the savory smell, but he was not yet to dine. Pole Crab, turning to go with the cooked fish in his hand, said, "These are mine, not yours. When yours are done, you can come back and join me, supposing you want company." "How soon will that be?" "About 20 minutes," replied the fisherman, over his shoulder. Maskell sheltered himself in the shadows of the forest, and waited. When the time had approximately elapsed, he disinterred his meal, scorching his fingers in the operation, although it was only the surface of the sand which was so intensely hot. Then he returned to Pole Crab. In the warm, still air and cheerful shade of the inlet, they munched in silence, looking from their food to the sluggish water and back again. With every mouthful, Maskell felt his strength returning. He finished before Pole Crab, who ate like a man for whom time has no value. When he had done, he stood up. "Come and drink," he said in a husky voice. Maskell looked at him inquiringly. The man led him a little way into the forest and walked straight up to a certain tree. At a convenient height in its trunk, a hole had been tapped and plugged. Pole Crab removed the plug and put his mouth to the aperture, sucking for quite a long while, like a child at a mother's breast. Maskell, watching him, imagined that he saw his eyes growing brighter. When his own turn came to drink, he found the juice of the tree somewhat like coconut milk in flavor, but intoxicating. It was a new sort of intoxication, however, for neither his will nor his emotions were excited, but only his intellect. And that only in a certain way. His thoughts and images were not freed and loosened, but on the contrary, kept laboring and swelling painfully until they reached the full beauty of an aperçu, which would then flame up in his consciousness, burst, and vanish. After that, the whole process started over again. But there was never a moment when he was not perfectly cool and master of his senses. When each had drunk twice, Pole Crab replugged the hole and returned to their bank. "Is it blood somber yet?" asked Maskell, sprawling on the ground, well content. Pole Crab resumed his old upright sitting posture with his feet in the water. "Just beginning," was his hoarse response. "Then I must stay here until it's over. Shall we talk?" "We can," said the other without enthusiasm. Maskell glanced at him through half-closed lids, wondering if he were exactly what he seemed to be. In his eyes he thought he detected a wise light. "Have you traveled much, Pole Crab?" "Not what you would call traveling." "You tell me you've been to Matterplay. What kind of country is that?" "I don't know. I went there to pick up flints." "What countries lie beyond it?" "Threo comes next as you go north. They say it's a land of mystics. I don't know." "Mystics?" "So I'm told. Still farther north there's Lichstorm." "Now we're going far afield." "There are mountains there, and altogether it must be a very dangerous place, especially for a full-blooded man like you. Take care of yourself." "This is rather premature, Pole Crab. How do you know I'm going there?" "As you've come from the south, I suppose you'll go north." "Well, that's right enough," said Maskell, staring hard at him. "But how do you know I've come from the south?" "Well, then, perhaps you haven't. But there's a look of Ifton about you." "What kind of look?" "A tragical look," said Pole Crab. He never even glanced at Maskell, but was gazing at a fixed spot in the water with unblinking eyes. What lies beyond Lich Storm? Asked Maskell after a minute or two. Barry, where you have two suns instead of one. But beyond that fact, I know nothing about it. Then comes the ocean. And what's on the other side of the ocean? That you must find out for yourself, for I doubt if anybody has ever crossed it and come back. Maskell was silent for a little while. How is it that your people are so unadventurous? I seem to be the only one traveling from curiosity. What do you mean by your people? True, you don't know that I don't belong to your planet at all. I've come from another world, Pole Crab. What to find? I came here with Crag and Nightspore, to follow Surtur. I must have fainted the moment I arrived. When I sat up, it was night and the others had vanished. Since then, I've been traveling at random. Pole Crab scratched his nose. You haven't found Surtur yet? I've heard his drum taps frequently. In the forest this morning, I came quite close to him. Then 2 days ago in the Illusion Plane, I saw a vision. A being in man's shape who called himself Surtur. Well, maybe it was Surtur. No, that's not possible. No, sorry, that's impossible, replied Maskell reflectively. It was Crystalman. And it isn't a question of my suspecting it. I know it. How? Because this is Crystalman's world, and Surtur's world is something quite different. That's queer then, said Pole Crab. Since I've come out of that forest, proceeded Maskell, talking half to himself, a change has come over me, and I see things differently. Everything here looks much more solid and real in my eyes than in other places, so much so that I can't entertain the least doubt of its existence. It not only looks real, it is real. And on that I would stake my life. But at the same time that it's real, it is false. Like a dream? No, not at all like a dream. And that's just what I want to explain. This world of yours, and perhaps of mine too, for that matter, doesn't give me the slightest impression of a dream or an illusion or anything of that sort. I know it's really here at this moment, and it's exactly as we're seeing it, you and I. Yet it's false. It's false in this sense, Pole Crab. Side by side with it, another world exists. And that other world is the true one. And this one is all false and deceitful, to the very core. And so it occurs to me that reality and falseness are two words for the same thing. Perhaps there is such another world, said Pole Crab huskily. But did that vision also seem real and false to you? Very real, but not false then, for then I didn't understand all this. But just because it was real, it couldn't have been Surtur, who has no connection with reality. Didn't those drum taps sound real to you? I had to hear them with my ears, so they sounded real to me. Still, they were somehow different, and they certainly came from Surtur. If I didn't hear them correctly, that was my fault and not his. Pole Crab growled a little. If Surtur chooses to speak to you in that fashion, it appears he's trying to say something. What else can I think? But Pole Crab, what's your opinion? Is he calling me to the life after death? The old man stirred uneasily. I'm a fisherman, he said after a minute or two. I live by killing, and so does everybody. This life seems to me all wrong. But maybe life of any kind is wrong, and Surtur's world is not life at all, but something else. Yes, but will death lead me to it, whatever it is? That's the dead, said Pole Crab, and not a living man. Maskell continued. In the forest I heard music and saw a light, which could not have belonged to this world. They were too strong for my senses, and I must have fainted for a long time. There was a vision as well, in which I saw myself killed, while Nightspore walked on toward the light, alone. Pole Crab uttered his grunt. You have enough to think over, A short silence ensued, which was broken by Maskell. So strong is my sense of the untruth of this present life that it may come to my putting an end to myself. The fisherman remained quiet and immobile. Maskell lay on his stomach, propped his face on his hands, and stared at him. What do you think, Pole Crab? Is it possible for any man, while in the body, to gain a closer view of that other world than I have done? I am an ignorant man, stranger, so I can't say. Perhaps there are many others like you who would gladly know. Where? I should like to meet them. Do you think you were made of one stuff and the rest of mankind of another stuff? I can't be so presumptuous. Possibly all men are reaching out toward Muspel, in most cases without being aware of it. In the wrong direction, said Polkreb. Maskell gave him a strange look. How so? I don't speak from my own wisdom, said Polkreb, for I have none. But I have just now recalled what Broodvile once told me, when I was a young man and he was an old one. He said that Crystalman tries to turn all things into one, and that whichever way his shapes march, in order to escape from him, they find themselves again face to face with Crystalman, and are changed into new crystals. But that this marching of shapes, which we call forking, springs from the unconscious desire to find Surtur, but is in the opposite direction to the right one. For Surtur's world does not lie on this side of the One, which was the beginning of life, but on the other side. And to get to it, we must repass through the One. But this can only be by renouncing our self-life and reuniting ourselves to the whole of Crystalman's world. And when this has been done, it is only the first stage of the journey, though many good men imagine it to be the whole journey. As far as I can remember, that is what Broodvile said. But perhaps, as I was then young and ignorant, that a young and ignorant man, I may have left out words. But perhaps, as I was then a young and ignorant man, I may have left out words which would explain his meaning better. Maskell, who had listened attentively to all this, remained thoughtful at the end. It's plain enough, he said. But what did he mean by our reuniting ourselves to Crystalman's world? If it is false, are we to make ourselves false as well? I didn't ask him that question, and you are as well qualified to answer it as I am. He must have meant that, as it is, we are each of us living in a false, private world of our own, a world of dreams and appetites and distorted perceptions. By embracing the great world, we certainly lose nothing in truth and reality. Polkrab withdrew his feet from the water, stood up, yawned, and stretched his limbs. I have told you all I know, he said in a surly voice. Now let me go to sleep. Maskell kept his eyes fixed on him, but made no reply. The old man let himself down stiffly onto the ground and prepared to rest. Okay, I think that's quite a bit to comment on.
Mm-hmm.
That paragraph on Broodvile is, in my interpretation, the meaning of this entire story. If you look up anything about this story, you will find this whole thing, he's a Gnostic, and the Gnostics think the whole world is evil, and you need to escape the world. This is very strange because this position, while still within the Gnostic tradition, is not at all the typical Gnostic standpoint. This tradition is the far more esoteric tradition, which you find in the likes of, Steiner, somebody like, what's his name? Swedenborg, and Hermeticism as well, which is the way to get out of this world is you gotta dive directly in it, and you have to go through its entire stages. You cannot become enlightened without having a taste of everything on this side of the demiurge's creation. To put it that way. So, Crystalman is a demiurge. And interestingly, he says, Crystalman tries to turn all things into one, and that whichever way his shapes march in order to escape from him, they find themselves again face to face with Crystalman, and are changed into new crystals. But that this marching of shapes, which we call forking, springs from the unconscious desire to find Surtur, but is in the opposite direction to the right one. For Surtur's world does not lie on this side of the one, which was the beginning of life, but on the other side. And to get to it, we must repass through the one. But this can only be by renouncing our self-life and reuniting ourselves to the whole of Crystalman's world. And when this has been done, it is only the first stage of the journey. Though many good men imagine it to be the whole journey. So for Surtur's world does not lie on this side of the one. I'm not quite sure who the one is here. If it's like the one in the philosophical sense, or if he's referring to the one as the demiurge or Surtur, not Surtur, Crystalman. It could kind of work either way. Because, insofar as there's still an understanding that the real world belongs to the one. This world is fake, false in some way. It's unreal. But that's just like the really basic dogmatic view of Gnosticism. Like the deeper view is this view that while this world is not the ultimate reality, and it's not the reality where we want to remain, nonetheless, we're here and we have to now go through this. We're in the cage, and now there's a certain path through the cage to get back out. And since you're in the cage, you got to follow it. There's going to be no way to get out other than that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So this can only be by renouncing our self-life and reuniting ourselves to the whole of Crystalman's world. And so I think this is part of the Enlightenment more so from the Hermetic tradition than from the Gnostic tradition, where the Hermetics are more this worldly. They're otherworldly, but they still think that they're still focused largely on bringing the divine into this world rather than leaving this world, which is part of what you're supposed to do. I think that's, in my own view, that's certainly the case. You're supposed to bring the divine into this world. You're supposed to make this world more real than it currently is. But you're also not supposed to get stuck here either. It's like a project. You have certain things, you have goals. Once you've accomplished the goals, there's no reason to keep repeating the same thing. If the goal here is to learn what this world actually is. So part of renouncing one's self-life is renouncing one's ego. And the ego only in a very fake sense. People talk about the ego but I got to let go of my ego. It's not your ego. In the esoteric sense, what people call ego today is not the true self at all. It's a false self. It's the self which you're possessed by another idea that you never were aware of. And you just believe that's yourself because you've never reflected upon it. Once you realize that it's not yourself, once you realize that to be yourself requires that you actually sit back and really understand not only yourself in the abstraction, but also yourself in this world, it requires you to open up to what things actually are in the far deeper sense. In doing so, you let go of your false self, which originally feels like your real self, but it's not. You link yourself to the world through knowledge and action. And in doing so, if the world is indeed false, necessarily you're going to start dismantling this false world from within, both for yourself and for others. You may accomplish this in the esoteric views on a very individual way, but you also may accomplish it in collective ways. On the individual ways, you have the views like, say, like, Buddhism, where you can become enlightened and, nirvana yourself out of this world. Or other, hermetic views in which you can transcend this reality, or, Neoplatonic views, go back to the one, and all that jazz. But that's after you've done your due diligence, worked yourself through this. Your soul no longer has any attachments because you've tasted everything. You now know what everything is like. You know what the real consequences are, and your soul no longer craves the connection. So it's that second side that nobody really knows of. There are a few people who talk about it, people like Steiner, people like Swedenborg, who will tell you what the otherworldly life is about, and that there is further things to do in that life. But many of the Enlightenment traditions that you find are focused on first escaping this world. A lot of them are try to escape this world immediately, rather than reconcile yourself to what is true in this world, and through that destroy the illusion and the falsehood from within. But they don't say anything about what is there in the other world. As a matter of fact, many of them deny there really is anything to the other world, because they just see this world as shit. It's bad, it's suffering, and it's just better not to be at all. Something like, classical Buddhism, for example, has that.
The notion of blowing yourself out like a candle.
Yeah. The whole idea, well, the self isn't real, it's just an illusion. But no, here, at least in this story, there is some notion that other world is determinately another world. It's not nothing. If you remember what's the weird guy's name? The guy who just grew his limbs or different organs. Something Fork.
Yeah, Slow Fork.
Slow Fork, yeah. And, his conversation with Panna, and he's like, that which we call nothing is in fact not nothing, but something. And, he says there's another world, which we call nothing, but it actually is something. Goes along with this. That you get out of this world, but there is a new real world. The real world, let's say. So what Maskell's been doing is not a mistake. He's been bumbling about, but what he's doing is he's learning in the best way that you actually learn. You don't learn by abstractions. You don't even learn by watching other people, really. The way that the soul essentially learns is you gotta do shit yourself. You find out by fucking around, and it's the school of hard knocks. Some people learn faster and learn the lessons faster, and some people are slower. But nonetheless, everybody has to go through everything, and this is one of the things you find in traditions that believe in reincarnation, which is the whole purpose of reincarnation, at least in the deeper traditions. Is that there's an evolution of the soul across lives, and in many ways, through all your lives, you will go through everything. You'll be an addict, you'll be a criminal, you'll be under shitty situations despite the fact that you're essentially good, you'll be in good situations despite the fact that you're essentially bad, everything, until your soul finally just gets tired and, you're kind of done. You're like, I learned my lessons, don't feel like coming back. So yeah, just to summarize that, again, this is what's happening. This isn't his entire journey. He's going through all these forms of consciousness is probably the best one, yeah, like to say it. They're not abstract ideas, really. They're very concrete. He's possessed down to the point of his emotions and his thinking, everything as a whole. and all like the world itself is also dominated by these principles. So he's going through all of these, falling deeply under them, coming out of them, falling into another, coming out of that. He has these like little moments between, both in them and between them, where he has these reprieves of reflection that he's learning something, and he's learning something that you can't learn just by being told. You know, it's one thing is to be told, look, you know, like being say like being like, you know, in a hardcore Nichin or something. You know, people will really think like, oh, they're inferior people, we got to kill them, like, you know, like the Ifton people. You know, it doesn't matter.
You shouldn't say that, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, they're inferior people.
Well, I'm not saying that I believe it. I'm just saying the Chins say that.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I know, but you know, Nietzsche didn't say it.
He did say it.
He said we should kill them.
Well,
no,
he said we should do whatever the hell we want with them.
Bring them up to his level. Well, yeah. When they're at that level.
Like, he was all for the Ubermensch, you know, like using them and abusing them because like they were animals.
Yeah, but he's supposed to show, the Ubermensch is meant to show how to live too. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, Nietzsche wasn't an Ubermensch, so what would he know? He was inconsistent about that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, he said it.
Yeah.
The point is, you're not like. It's one thing to look at that and to abstractly believe it.
Yeah.
It's another thing to like fully fall into it, really believe it, and do it. And you learn certain things by actually like really being a genuine believer in doing things. Not necessarily just intellectual. Like the learning is not just an intellectual thing. Like you're going through emotional learning as well. It's just like being an addict. You know, there's certain things in which like an addict understands things on a level that you don't. You know, when you're not an addict, but they do. You know, they really understand that. Yeah, don't touch, you know, crack or cocaine. Don't touch heroin. Don't touch the, you know, like all kinds of weird fucked up drugs that people take, like crocodile or whatever.
Bath salts.
Yeah, like they know intuitively because they've gone through it, and so like they have the proper emotional response. Whereas somebody who merely knows on an abstract intellectual level does not.
Like us, who were, you know, Dare was apparently effective on us because we never did that stuff.
Yeah. So that's what's happening with Maskell. He's going through all these. He's learning on the deep level, not just the intellectual level.
Yeah, he's literally going through each of these zones, letting them affect him to their fullest extent, and then, you know, understanding them from that perspective, and then going on to the next one.
Yep. And that's how you escape the trap.
Yeah. Like Steiner says, we have to deal with Ahriman, you know, the devil. You know, you can't just ignore it and say, I don't want to participate with it. You have to deal with it. You have to face it. You have to learn to live with it, kind of.
Yep. Another thing to comment on, Polkrab is, Polkrab says he's not wise. It's very clear he, in fact, is very wise.
Yeah. This is a Socrates type thing where it's like, oh, no.
You know, Maskell's kind of also seen this now, because at first he's like, oh, this guy looks like a simpleton, and he has a very weird face, like, you know, flat face, full of wrinkles, you know, like no expression, like no emotional expression on his face. Kind of looks like well, very cartoony, really. I mean, it reminds me of that one SpongeBob episode, you know, where he's like normal or whatever. If you remember that, it's that kind of fucking looked dead-eyed look, but it's kind of one of those contradictions between somebody who's genuine, like it's a contradiction between like his external appearance, the appearance of enlightenment, and the internal like being of enlightenment. He's an enlightenment like stereotype of or archetype of a certain kind. The closest one I know is like the whole Zen thing of, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. That the sage who is truly a sage basically doesn't really live or look any different from you and I. They look pretty normal. They don't really act in any more of a weird or meaningful way. You only find out by, getting to know them. And even then, they don't make a big deal about it. You're like, yeah, I'm enlightened, so what? I still live life. I still got a job. Still garden. Still go on walks. Sometimes, a lot of them still drink and all these other things. So the difference is just a difference of a reflexive kind of perspective. It's not really a difference of... It can lead to significant differences on the external side about, changes in what you do and all these things, but it doesn't necessarily have to, depending on who you are. So, point is, enlightenment doesn't look just one way. So, the people in the Womb Flesh Forest, basically, and also the people on Sant, basically look at fucking yogis and rastas, and sure, people go like, yeah, that's what it looks like to be enlightened, and that's kind of where enlightened people go and hang out. Nobody tends to think that the enlightened person is going to be hanging out, just bumming around, just fishing, and that they would basically be a pretty characterless figure, both physically and seemingly emotionally. And expressively. I mean, he's pretty plain. Nonetheless, there it is. So, all right. So while he was still arranging his position to his liking, a footfall sounded behind the two women, coming from the direction of the forest. Maskell twisted his neck and saw a woman approaching them. He at once guessed that it was Pole Crab's wife. He sat up, but the fisherman did not stir. The woman came and stood in front of them, looking down from what appeared a great height. Her dress was similar to her husband's, but covered her limbs more. She was young, tall, slender, and strikingly erect. Her skin was slightly tanned, and she looked strong, but not at all peasant-like. Refinement was stamped all over her. Her face had too much energy of expression for a woman, and she was not beautiful. Her 3 eyes kept flashing and glowing. She had great masses of fine, yellow hair coiled up and fastened, but so carelessly that some of the strands were flowing down her back. When she spoke, it was in a rather weak voice, but full of lights and shades, and somehow intense passionateness never seemed to be far away from it. "Forgiveness is asked for listening to your conversation," she said, addressing Maskell. "I was resting behind a tree and heard it all." He got up slowly. "Are you Pole Crab's wife?" "She is my wife," said Pole Crab. "And her name is Gleemail. Sit down again, stranger. And you too, wife, since you are here." They both obeyed. "I heard everything," repeated Gleemail. "But what I did not hear was where you are going to, Maskell, after you have left us." "I know no more than you do." "Listen, then. There's only one place for you to go to, and that is Swaylone's Island. I will ferry you across myself before sunset." "What shall I find there?" "He may go, wife," put in the old man hoarsely, "but I won't allow you to go. I will take him over myself." "No, you have always put me off," said Gleemail with some emotion. "This time I mean to go. When Tyrgeld shines at night, and I sit on the shore here, listening to Earthred's music, traveling faintly across the sea, I am tortured. I can't endure it. I have long since made up my mind to go to the island and see what this music is. If it's bad, if it kills me, well." "What have I to do with a man and his music, Gleemail?" demanded Maskell. "I think the music will answer all your questions better than Pole Crab has done, and possibly in a way that will surprise you." "What kind of music can it be to travel all across those miles of the sea? All those miles across the sea?" "A peculiar kind, so we are told. Not pleasant, but painful. And the man that can play the instrument of Earthred would be able to conjure up the most astonishing forms, which are not phantasms, but realities." That may be so, growled Polcrab, but I have been to the island by daylight, and what did I find there? Human bones, new and ancient. Those are Earthrid's victims, and you, wife, shall not go. But will that music play tonight? Asked Maskell. Yes, replied Gleamiel, gazing at him intently. When Tyrgeld rises, which is our moon. If Earthrid plays men to death, it appears to me that his own death is due. In any case, I should like to hear those sounds for myself. But as for taking you with me, Gleamiel, women die too easily in torments. I have only just now washed myself clean of the death blood of another woman. Gleamiel laughed, but said nothing. Now go to sleep, said Polcrab. When the time comes, I will take you across myself. He lay down again and closed his eyes. Maskell followed his example, but Gleamiel remained sitting erect with her legs under her. Who was that other woman, Maskell? She asked presently. He did not answer, but pretended to sleep. And that's the end of that comment on her name, Gleam Eel. Or Gleam. Gleamail?
Gleamail.
Gleam. Yeah, Gleamail.
Like shining.
Yeah, it's Gleam for shine. And then eel. Yeah, I don't know what the second part is.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, it's like just a suffix, I think.
Well, it kind of sounds like eel.
Yeah.
It could be.
It could be. Ooh, I don't know.
Male. Nah.
Yeah, I don't think so.
A male. No, I don't know. Well, she certainly knows things. We'll find out very quickly. I'll just have to think about what. I'll have to see if there's anything else to that. Her eyes are shining, and it seems to be that the shining eyes thing. When Polcrab drank the stuff from that one tree, his eyes started shining, and that seems to go along with insight. So she seems to have a lot of insight.
There are other names here.
Earthrid, Tyrgeld. Tyrgeld's the moon. We haven't heard about the moon before.
Tyr, of course, and Geld is gold.
Yeah, and it's described later on that since, just like our moon, it's hit by the suns, it's hit by both suns. And then where the colors meet together, there's a band of green that's noticeable. I forget what it is that... it certainly makes him feel something, but I forget what it is that it makes you feel, but it's described later in the next chapter. Earthrid. Simple. Earth and rid. Not only does that music seem to rid the people of their earthly coil, well, no, I think that's basically it. It's about that. His music rips people away from this world. Gleamiel explains it in the next chapter that this music is unlike anything else in the world. There's this whole little myth that's told. That's very short. The myth is basically this: when the world was young, Shapey makes all this. Crystalman. He makes this particular place, Swaylone's Island. The first guy that goes there is named Swaylone. Simple name, obvious. Sway and alone. Music, you sway to it, and this is a very lonely kind of music.
Yep. The other word it can be read is ear thread. Ear thread. Because a thread is a thread. Same thing. So.
Yeah, that would actually go well because it's music. So,
yep.
What you find out what the instrument does, it's very much a thread of thought.
Yep.
So a spiritual thread. So Swaylone, on the island, the instrument is actually this weird metallic lake, which originally plays, and she mentions this here, that it plays not phantasms but realities. That as you play, what you do is you don't think of music, you think of forms. And what corresponds to the sound of that form and its physical forms is going to be the thing that is emanated as a sound which other people perceive. And originally, since this is the world of Crystal Men, and Crystal Men tries to trap you by pleasure, it played nice music. And then one day, Crystal Man comes along with Craig. What do you know? They're hanging out, and Crystal Man's like, look at the great world I've made. And he's like, isn't it awesome? And Craig's like, yeah, your world's a piece of shit. They go by Swaylo's Island, and he's like, come on, man, you got to appreciate the great music, at least. And Craig's like, yeah, no, your music's shit. I can do better. And so, like, Crystal Man, like, first infuses Swaylone with his ideas, and like the music becomes like so amazing and beautiful and like pleasurable that it just fucking like causes people to spaz out on like ever before. And then like Craig's like, I can do one better, and he zaps his ideas to Swaylone's, and he fucks up the entire instrument, breaks it fundamentally, so that it can never play right again, can't make beautiful sounds. But now it plays everything off tune in a very peculiar way. And the music's even more addicting than it originally was. And it's actually explained later because it's very kind of obvious. I've already explained before. I've commented on this on other chapters, that the whole metaphor of pain with Craig is that the pain reveals the actual reality of Crystalman's world. So, the surface appearance is one of pleasure, but the deep essence is actually one of pain. So because this music is painful, it reveals the true nature of the world. And since like everybody essentially within, is yearning without knowing it to escape this world, that music reveals that yearning itself. And it's torturous, and at the same time you want more of it. So that's what Swaylon's Island and his music is about. Comment on Pole Crab's name again. One, like, he looks like a crab, kind of. The pole, he's a fisherman. Crab, he grabs things. But I think the crab part is not just like a thing about, he has huge hands. Unlike a certain president, but if you know that joke. If you're not American, you wouldn't get it. I think it's also in that he grabs hold. Like the whole thing, crabs in a bucket, they grab hold of each other. He kind of also like grabs hold of people who are kind of on the right way, and he just kind of pulls them a little bit along to show them the other way. And that's basically what he's done with Maskell. He's this little bit of wisdom he's given, which is actually an immense amount of wisdom. Is going to push him along on his journey. Where is it that he describes how she looks? Let's see. She was young, tall, slender, and strikingly erect. Skin slightly tanned, and she looked strong, but not at all peasant-like, because, pole crab does look kind of like a peasant. Refinement was stamped all over her. At least externally, it's a very different thing. It's like pole crab doesn't look at all like what he essentially is like. But she does, in a way. Her face had too much energy of expression for a woman. While pole crab has no expression, she's like direct opposite. She has too much expression. And she was not beautiful. Her 3 great eyes kept flashing and glowing. She had great masses of fine yellow hair curled up and fastened, but so carelessly that some of the strands were flowing down her back. The yellow can be like symbolizing of, one is the color of friendship, another one is also kind of the color of gold. Gold's very significant esoteric symbolism, refined, it's a refinement of the soul, and she certainly seems to have a refined soul. Hair is significant, at least in the practice. It's symbolic as well, but also there's believed to be a lot of spiritual energy contained in our hair, which is why stuff like yogis and rastas and the likes don't cut their hair. It's bad for your spiritual capacities. So she has quite a lot of it. Tries to, coiled up and fastened, but so carelessly that the strands were flowing down her back. So she's refined, very refined at the same time. There's some parts of it, aspects of her that are not. Clearly feminine, pole crab seems to have some kind of deep intellectual knowledge. She also seems to have some kind of deep knowledge, but instead of intellectual, she's very intuitive. She's aesthetic. Feminine, masculine divide right there. She has her own, the next chapter, she'll have a little bit of a conversation with Maskell. We'll find out that she certainly has her own quality of insight, which her husband doesn't have, and which Maskell also makes great use of. So, despite the fact that there is some, like I think I mentioned in the very first one, there's what I would call a metaphysical misogyny in this story. Nonetheless, a lot of what happens is still pretty even-handed with the women. Like the women have an insight that the men don't have, which is equally necessary. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to comment on after that. So next time we'll continue on to chapter 15, Swalon's Island, which has a little bit of music theory thrown in. It's the most musical chapter. But all right, for those of you listening, hopefully you're enjoying it so far. We will see you next time.